This is the Hunt Quietly podcast. I'm Matt Ranella.
I better get another cigar ready. This might take a while.
Yeah. Get a cup of Joe and a cigar. What better way to spend a Sunday morning?
That's it. I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning trying to answer questions.
Oh, really? Yeah.
on some of Troy's videos.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, you just did a couple videos a video with Troy. I saw that posted.
Yeah, we've got, I think, 3 out in about the last week and a half. Going to have another one next week. We recorded one yesterday.
Oh, nice. Very nice. So, Dr. Ed, thanks for joining us on the podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, doing well.
For those that may not know you or know the Ashby Foundation, why don't you tell us about yourself and like where you grew up? You grew up from Texas, right?
I grew up in East Texas, correct.
East Texas. And I'm assuming you started hunting early on, right?
I certainly did. I actually got interested in bow hunting. Yeah, I grew up in a hunting family, not a bow hunting family, but a hunting family. Dad was an NRA rifle instructor, and I started shooting with a rifle. Shot my first match when I was 5 years old. I don't even remember starting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hunting was a big thing, and Dad was very much into reloading, terminal ballistics, things like, I just grew up listening to that kind of stuff. And I was in the 3rd grade, and Howard Hill came to school and put on a shooting exhibition. He was promoting his movie Timba.
Oh, wow.
Which was currently showing in the theaters. And that got me started. I went home that very day and made me a bow out of a willow limb and cut down some canes, cut some points out of tin cans, tied them on, plucked some feathers out of our chickens and ducks, tied them on with sewing thread. My bow lasted just a handful of shots before it broke, but I was already hooked. Now, from there, it just carried on. Got to the point that, all my money that I came into got spent on archery. Dad never could understand it. Neither could my older brother. My 3 oldest brothers were no longer home, so they didn't get involved at all. But my older brother was 3 years older than me. And, he went bow hunting a few times, but it just never caught on with him. He was a devoted rifleman. He died about 3 years ago.
Are you the youngest?
Yep, I'm the youngest. I'm the only one left out of the siblings. Everybody else is gone.
That's too bad.
Bloodline's not going to die out. I've got, I think, 39 nieces and nephews.
Big family. That's
brothers were quite busy.
Yeah, my mother was one of 12 kids, so.
Yeah, my oldest brother had 13. Next oldest had 11. Next oldest had 9. And then Don had 2.
So what was hunting like in East Texas as you become into a bow hunter?
Well, when I started out bow hunting, there were 2 of us in the entire county. And James Hayes became my hunting partner, a lot older than me. James was a World War II vet, lost his hearing in fighting in New Guinea. And a mortar round landed. He was the person it landed close to and didn't get a scratch, but he killed everybody else in his squad.
Jeez.
But he was stone deaf.
Oh.
And he could hear with hearing aids, bone transmission hearing aids. But we became hunting partners. And at that point, it was such a novel thing that we could shoot a bullfrog and get on the front page of the paper.
Really?
Yes. And we started out doing varmint calling because we saw some articles by the Burnham brothers. They were the only people making a commercial varmint call of any kind at the time. I think the article was in either Outdoor Life or Sports Field. And so we started varmint calling, and we shot all sorts of predators, and we had a bobcat come in one day, and James shot it, and it filled up almost the whole front page of the newspaper. A lot of people didn't even know we had bobcats in East Texas.
Nice. Very nice.
Later, I found one of my friends in high school, Jimmy Key, uh, got him interested in bow hunting. And then a fellow transferred in. He ran the five and dime store. He later got transferred to Colorado, lived at Arvada, and we went up and hunted with him up there. But that was about the totality of bow hunters in my county until I went into college. Well, bow hunting wasn't widespread,
Yeah.
but we did have Ben Pearson up in Arkansas and Bob Lee with his factory in Jacksonville, Texas. Well, that was only about 35 miles from me.
Wow.
So I became very good friends with both of them. With Ben Pearson because I got interested in shooting some of his bows because I liked his bows. I love the wing bows too. Uh, and I went up to Pine Bluff, Arkansas to pick up a bow for a hunt in Colorado that I had upcoming, me and James Hayes, and a young kid from, I can't even remember his name, from Jasper, Texas. Uh, but anyway, when I was up there, I stayed for a couple of days and visited with Ben Pearson a lot. And he gave me 3 deadheads, which were prototypes at that time. And I killed a mule deer with one. So it was among, he had done some testing and one of his close friends. And then I guess other than them, I had the first animal taken with a deadhead because it wasn't even on the market yet.
Oh, wow.
And after that time that I spent up there, I became quite good friends with Ben Pearson and got a lot of good tips from him. A lot of the hunting that I did and the archery concepts I adopted were because of the direct tutorial effect of Ben Pearson.
Right. That's huge to have such an influence at a young age as a bow hunter, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Bob Lee had the first bow hunting only lease ever in Texas at Wheelock, and we had 120 families with memberships of that lease. It was a pretty big lease.
Bow hunting only.
The bow hunting only, although they would allow the last 2 weeks of season, which would at that time been the end of December. Season went out the end of December. You could go down with a rifle because we did need to take animals off there. There were so many deer that during one of our archery seasons there, on land adjacent to where we hunted, Texas Fish and Game culls 600 whitetails, and we couldn't even tell it made a difference in the deer population.
That's crazy. 600.
And deer didn't, they didn't know what bows and arrows were. When we first started down there, out of a tree stand, you could get 5 or 6 shots at a deer. It had no idea what was happening. It only took about 2 years for them to learn. And they got to the point they knew where most of the permanent tree stands were, and they'd stop out there and look up in the trees to see if they could see anybody.
That's pretty crazy.
How fast whitetails learn.
Yeah, because I'm from Pennsylvania, and in the Pennsylvania woods, deer look up all the time. But I've archery hunted Illinois quite a bit, and I found that the deer in the Midwest, or at least Illinois, They don't look up.
Yeah, it's a learned response from the deer.
Yeah.
And what you have to do is adopt different tactics. When they started looking at known elevated stands, and most of the ones that there weren't any commercial stands then. Most of what we had were actually built out of lumber or timbers, out of big limbs up in the trees. And James and I got to the point that we would just climb some small tree, stand up there on either a single board or just on a limb, and ambush the deer.
Yeah.
That worked well. And then I adopted a lot of hunting from ground blinds because they were all looking up in the trees. So you
Right.
just have to modify your hunting tactics, and that still applies today. You modify your hunting tactics to do things the animals don't expect.
Yeah. So what's your professional outside of the foundation? What was your professional background?
I'm an eye doctor.
An eye doctor.
I was
Okay.
drafted into the Air Force in the last draft they had, and got allocated. Draft notice, of course, came from the Army. Got allocated to the Air Force. The That was during the Vietnam War. So actually, like the doctor's draft, specialty drafts, the Army would draft and then they would partial you out to the other branches. And so I spent almost 10 years in the Air Force, and then I transferred to the Commissioned Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service, which most people don't realize is a uniformed service, just like the military service.
Okay.
And I served 24 years there. Uh, a lot of it, the first several years, on Indian reservations up in Minnesota, Red Lake Reservation. And then I became the area director for the Indian Health Service for that region, which covers 7 states. Um, and then there were some circumstances. I became a whistleblower on some things, and they ended up moving and I became the chief of eye care for the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Wow.
For my last 4 years on duty. Then I retired, liquidated everything I had in the States except my collection of books, which I stored with a friend, and I moved to Africa. And I did my own hunting and got heavily involved in my own research, and also worked as a professional hunter. And bow hunting was new enough to Africa that most of the PHs that got to know me and know what I did, if they had a bow hunter coming, they would have me come and assist them, and I would guide the bow hunter. Uh, there were a couple of other people over there that were familiar with bow hunting, bow hunted themselves, who were also PHs. And sometimes we all worked together when we had a large group of, say, 6 bow hunters at a time.
So were you
And,
there all year long, or were you coming back and forth to the
I
States?
lived there permanently.
Oh, you did.
Yes, I based my home base in Zimbabwe. I did that because I started hunting that area when it was Rhodesia. 1975, during the Rhodesian War, I hunted in the Zambezi Valley, and we were the only hunters in the Zambezi Valley at the time because of the war. Uh, and so I got to know a lot of people there, and the PH that first guided me became one of the best friends of my life, and the guy that I consider giving me my PhD in tracking skills and
Yeah.
stalking skills. I learned so much from him. He passed away on New Year's Eve. Actually, it was on the 30th, but I didn't know it for a while. When I was notified, it was on the 31st, and I thought he died on the 31st. So ever since then, we have a ceremony that's worldwide. I've got friends all around the world, and at sundown, wherever they are, we host a little ceremony where you take your favorite libation and you do a toast, and we have a standard toast for Gordon's remembrance,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's may you always drink upstream from the herd, and
Very
he would
nice.
understand that, and so we remember him every year. And actually, the only photograph I have up on the wall here in the house is right in front of me. I can see it right now. Is a picture of me and Gordon. Uh,
Nice.
he was an incredible character who could talk about the sex life of the dung beetle for at least 2 hours nonstop. Uh, he knew he only had a formal third grade education, but was one of the most educated humans I've ever known. He was a prolific reader and had virtually and it may have actually been a photographic memory.
Wow.
Um,
And this is a
he
tracker.
could
This was a
almost tell you the page that things were on in various books. I've seen him sit and talk to clients about things as diverse as the American Civil War and art of the Ming Dynasty.
wow.
His knowledge base was the best I've ever seen of a human being across more topics than anyone I've ever encountered. That includes all the professors I've ever known. Nobody's close.
Wow. That's
I
amazing.
really miss him. He was a big influence on my life.
And Gordon was a tracker,
Gordon was a professional hunter.
professional.
He was the last true professional hunter in Africa because he did not have another job. He
Yes.
wasn't a farmer or a rancher or a doctor or a lawyer or anything else. He was a professional hunter. And that was it. That was his livelihood full time.
Yeah.
And when he died, as far as I know, there is not another professional hunter anywhere in Africa since then that was a full time professional hunter.
That's interesting. So you're living in Africa full time as a professional hunter,
Yes.
and is this where like the idea of is born about broadheads and penetration?
Uh,
Because you completed the Natel study while you were in
yeah.
Africa, is that correct?
No, that was before I was in Africa.
Oh, before you were in Africa. So
Yeah.
let's go back to the Natel study, and if you could
All right.
explain that, that would be awesome.
Well, luck, guidance, divine providence, whatever you want to call it, seems to have guided the study, my interest in terminal ballistics of arrows all my life. Things have just fallen into place at the right time. I had written, well, let me go back. The South African Parks Board, Natal province, decided they wanted to look at the possibility of legalizing bow hunting, uh, mainly because it would bring more hunters and more revenue, more foreign currency into the country. It
Yeah.
was basically an economic decision on the part of government. So the Natal Parks Board was meeting, talking about how they were going to do this research. One of the topics that came up was how big an animal can you take? Well, someone in that meeting, and I believe it to have been Spud Ludingham, but I don't know that for a fact, said, somebody wrote me about 5 years ago asking if they could hunt a rhino. And of course, it was not legal, and that was the reply I got. So I kind of dismissed the thought. And he said, let me see if I can find his information. He dug in his files. Sure enough, he still had my letter. They contacted me via a phone call and said, we're doing this thing. Do you still want to come hunt a rhino? Well, I didn't have to think very long about it. And So that was only the second guided hunt that I ever paid for in Africa. I paid for my first one with Gordon, and then I paid for that rhino hunt. And I went over and did the rhino hunt and shot the rhino. But during the time I was there, they got talking to me about what they were trying to do.
Wait, but you shot the
Gordon,
rhino with a recurve bow?
longbow.
A long bow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. 115-pound longbow at 27-inch draw, 1,186 grain error. Uh, they got to talk to me about what they wanted to do, and they said, "Would you be interested in coming back next year? We'd like to have you shoot another rhino, see if that was a fluke, or if is it a repeatable thing." Um, and we would like to take a look at how different arrow setups perform on game to look at the possibility of, do we need to put some kind of restriction on them, something of that nature. And they said, could you come back and after you shoot the rhino, we're going to go in before we do the annual rifle cull in Makuzi Park. They have to take off several thousand animals every year
Okay.
out of Makuzi Park because there's not habitat to support the population if it goes above a certain level. And they said, we'll go in before the cull and we want to shoot animals and we want to take these different arrow setups, see how they perform. But we also want you to take every shot you think you can hit. Because one of the things we want to look at is what happens when you make a bad shot. Now, in the Natal study, we were backed up with a rifle so that any shot that looked like it was not fatal, they were put down with a rifle with the bullet placed remote where the arrow hit.
Okay.
So you look at what the arrow did, try to determine what happened. Would it have been lethal or would it not? And if not, why not? And we tried to make those determinations in the field, but if we couldn't, they took the whole thing back because they had veterinarians on staff that could dissect the animal and tell us exactly would it have been a fatal shot and exactly what had happened with the shot. So we had tremendous resource to work with during the tall study. And in 30 days there, well, I shot another rhino first. And I ended up recommending, and we're trying to get that reversed now because arrow setups are better. But at the time, I recommended that they not allow hunting of the rhino. It is bloody dangerous for the hunter, and it puts a huge burden on the professional hunter because should something go wrong, he's not going to have a lot of opportunity to stop that rhino.
Yeah.
With his rifle. And during the rhino hunting, I spent a lot of time. Me and Chris Freeman spent a lot of time running from rhino.
Wow, that's incredible.
Ducking behind trees, and we had one rhino stay after us for 5 minutes. He would get scent of us. He would charge, and we would run when he was running, hide behind trees. He would circle us, pick up the wind again, and charge again. And that went on for what seemed like days, but it was probably 4 or 5 minutes.
And this is a fatally hit rhino at this point?
No, this is one we didn't even shoot.
Oh, geez. So they're that aggressive even without a shot.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I have no knowledge of rhinos and how to hunt them and
They can be extremely dangerous. In 1975, my first hunt, I didn't shoot a rhino because they weren't allowed, weren't on the animal list.
Yeah.
In Rhodesia, but we ran from rhino every single day. That's how many rhino there were. we would get routed out by at least one rhino every day.
Gee, that's incredible. So,
And
but
now there are none left in the Zambezi Valley. They've all been poached out. But to give you an idea how bad it is, Tony Tompkinson, who was my host for the Natal study in Makuzi Park, had a pretty large house. It was a concrete house. The reinforcement in the concrete house is nothing but wire snares that they had taken up. They used that to reinforce the concrete of the entire house. That's how bad poaching was.
Jeez.
And that's inside the park.
Wow.
But back to the study.
So, I'm sorry, leading up to this study, before you're shooting rhinos, leading up to this study, you've developed a baseline of knowledge on arrow, weight, and broadhead,
Well,
or you
I
winging it?
started. We did the Natal study in '84 and '85, but I started keeping documented information in 1982 because now by then I had already bow hunted for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Never kept any records, but that was the first year. Well, '81 was the first year that I ever used a compound to hunt with. I had shot some before. So I shot the Allen compound, which nobody remembers now. What was the original, very first compound ever commercially made. But I bought it in whole hog from what I was reading in the magazine. And I got some very light arrows and multi-blade broadheads because this is what they were replaceable blade type mechanical.
Yeah.
And that year, I hit and failed to recover 4 deer.
Okay.
Now, I had never done that in my career,
Okay.
shooting traditional equipment. So I started, having the shooting background with the rifles that I have. I did what I would have done with a rifle. I started to try to research to find some information on why I got this kind of results, why I was hitting these deer and not killing them.
Yeah.
And there was nothing, absolutely nothing that I could find on it. So I decided that for my own information, I would start documenting what was happening. And so I had started keeping some records before then. But when the opportunity for the Natal study came up, we formalized some basic information that we wanted to record from every shot. And so during that 30 days at Makuzi, I shot 154 animals. And we collected the information from them. And of course, formalized a report that went to the Natal Parks Board. But at the end of it, I had more questions than I did when we started. So I decided, okay, I've got to continue keeping records, continue trying to figure out what was wrong. Well, the records are sketchy, in number, up until I retired and went to Africa. And then, if I was not guiding, I was either hunting or doing test shots, continually. Hunting probably 300 days a year average.
Jeez.
So I got in shoot, a lot of animals. I also had some research in that period of time where I was doing terminal ballistic research for Barnes bullets. So I had both of these things going. But when I started doing it on my own, the data points that I started recovering were 118 data points on every shot fired. Now, what we collect today for the foundation, because there's new components, new things that have to be tracked, we're tracking 250 data points off of every arrow shot.
Jeez, wow.
So we have everything, the specifications of every piece of that arrow setup. We have all of the data about the bow poundage, the draw length, launch velocities, launch energy, launch momentum, impact velocity, impact momentum, everything about it. Uh, what was hit, the exact course of the arrow, what organs were hit. It is absolutely comprehensive information and in searchable database. So we can select out individual animals or individual types of bones from individual shot angles on an individual animal.
Yeah.
So we can come up with a lot of information
Yeah,
out of our database.
this is cutting
Uh,
edge stuff.
yeah, we're trying to be as comprehensive as possible. You have to have this mass of data when you're doing outcome driven research. You can't set up a bunch of parameters like you can in a lab controlled study and say, oh, okay, we are going to set everything this way and it's going to be this way on every shot. Because in the real world, we're not dealing with that.
Doesn't
We
happen
are
that way,
dealing
right?
with unpredictable variables on every shot. And so all you can do is with outcome driven studies is you collect all this information, then you look at what happened and when it happened, under what conditions did it happen, are there things that influence that outcome or things that could be changed that would influence that outcome. So you're taking all this information and working backwards. This is what happens. Now, why did it happen? And what can we do that might improve that outcome?
Yeah.
And that's the whole basis of the study.
So the Natal study is accepted by the South African government and essentially was the force that legalized bow hunting in South Africa. Is that correct?
Correct. And that was the first affirmative bow hunting law in all of Africa. Prior to that, any country that mentioned bow hunting, it was to prohibit it. Now,
Okay.
there were some places you could bow hunt that had no ways and means in their hunting regulations. In other words, you could go hunt with a blowgun or
Yeah.
a slingshot if you wanted to.
Right.
And,
Right.
and that's how people, like Howard Hill and Bob Swinehart and so forth, managed to hunt Africa with a bow, is that they hunted the handful of places that had no ways and means.
Okay.
And once South Africa legalized bow hunting, within a year, Natal, Botswana, Zimbabwe Zambia had all legalized bow hunting. They followed South Africa's lead, mostly for economic reasons. They look, hey, these bow hunters are all going to South Africa. We want part of that too.
Yeah. Right.
Most things in government are driven by the almighty dollar.
No doubt. No doubt. So from the Natal study, the foundation is born. Is that correct?
No, the foundation wasn't born until after my injury, and I had to quit. Was no longer physically able to carry on the study.
Okay.
And I had my back injury in 2008. Broke my back down in New Zealand, and it took multiple operations. I've had 45 operations since then.
Oh, geez.
Uh, so I'm the $6 million man plus. uh, but in 2000, actually, probably a year earlier than that. I don't remember whether it was at Safari Club International. It was something like that. Uh, Several people started talking to me about they'd like to try to start this foundation to
Okay.
carry out the research and promote the information as a free thing, nonprofit thing. And it took a year or so to, get all the paperwork done, get it, government recognized as a 501c3 nonprofit. And so the foundation officially came into existence in 2017.
Okay.
And
There's some years between the study and the foundation, the original Natal
yeah,
study.
yeah,
Yeah. So at this point, you're just hunting and gathering data on your own.
yeah. After when Zimbabwe fell apart, uh, things had already got bad. I had some friends killed, all sorts of things there. But
Like when you say Zimbabwe got bad for violence, is that what you're referring to?
yes, when the government started confiscating farms,
Okay.
uh, and uh, giving no compensation for them. Uh, so it was 2001. The U.S. Congress passed a thing called the Zimbabwe Democracy Bill, and when they did, Mugabe retaliated immediately by throwing out all of the Americans that did not have permanent residency
Oh,
in
okay.
Zimbabwe. And I didn't have permanent residency. I got caught on the first day, and I had 24 hours to leave the country. And I lost everything I had: house, property, vehicles, hunting kit. Uh, I got out with my guns, which I had to take out, required to, my binoculars, and one change of clothes.
Jeez, I didn't
And
realize it was that bad.
I lost everything else. Everything was taken. And even my bow hunting equipment, even Lady, my favorite bow, I did not get out with. But the day that I had to fly out, which I would not have been able to do without the aid of the U.S. Embassy, uh, to even get on a plane in time to get out, to avoid being thrown in prison. Uh, some friends went into the house. They managed to pick up some of my stuff, including some, not all, some of my archery equipment. And those same friends eventually lost their farm, lost everything. But they managed to save Lady, uh, which I'd asked them to try to do. But they told me that within 24 hours of leaving, the government was already in my house taking everything away.
Damn. I had
Uh,
no idea it was that bad. I remember hearing the stories, but yeah, that's incredibly sad.
yeah, and that's one reason that I have a lot of friends in New Zealand, Australia, because a lot of the people that lost everything and tried to get out of the country had British passports. And we here in the United States wouldn't take them in. A couple went to Canada, most went to New Zealand or Australia, or back to England.
Unreal.
A lot could not get out. Some of those have moved to places like Zambia and South Africa and so forth. Uh, it was actually a very terrible situation. But when they threw me out, I had liquidated everything in the States, and I had invested everything in Zimbabwe. And so I had to start life over
Wow.
with nothing other than my retirement income.
Wow.
And I had invested a significant amount of money over there that was now all gone. So I regrouped and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. That took me a couple of months. Came back to the States, stayed with a friend out in New Mexico. Uh, and then I decided, okay, some friends from Australia, well, one notably was one of my hunting clients, uh, said, look, come take a look at Australia. And so I went down and spent, I don't remember, 3 months, I believe it was. Uh, he found me a used vehicle, uh, had it ready for me to pick up. When I arrived, he picked me up at the airport and took me to get my vehicle. And I took off and explored everything from South Australia up to the Northern Territory in that 3 months. I spent all that time on the road. Uh, and at the end of it, came back to the States for a short period of time and decided, okay, I looked into it. I would have had to bring in, if I remember right, it was $100,000 minimum to get residency in Australia. Well, I didn't have $100,000. So I looked at the way their laws were set up, and I could go down and get a visa into Australia for 3 months, and then I had to get out of Australia. But there was no time limit. I had to be out before I could get a new visa and come back in. So I looked at New Zealand. Same thing. 3 months, you got to leave. You can come back in. And so that's what I started doing. I would go down. I would spend 3 months in Australia. Then I would go over to New Zealand, where I had several friends from Zimbabwe living. And I would spend 3 months in New Zealand. And sometimes, when I explored everything, I traveled every road, even some that aren't on the map in New Zealand. It's not a big country.
Yeah.
It's not as big as Texas. And so I started going to Vanuatu and New Guinea and other places during my exits. And so I got to explore a good bit of that South Pacific region. And I was doing that for 7 years up until I broke my back in New Zealand.
Jeez.
And at that point, and I won't even go into how bad socialized medicine is. They have socialized, and I have some real horror stories about that. But I ended up having to come back to the States as soon as I was able to travel in a wheelchair. Did not know if I was ever going to walk again.
Was this a hunting accident or just a?
No. With all the dumb things and risky situations I've been in my life, I slipped on a wet linoleum floor in a friend's house on the South Island of New Zealand. And they have mud rooms because it rains almost constantly. They're like coastal Alaska. And from their mud room into the kitchen, they have this concrete barrier, maybe 5 inches wide, 3 inches tall. And when I slipped, I came down with my back right across that concrete barrier.
Isn't that something? You chase rhinos and elephants and.
I've hunted elephants. I've had buffalo charges.
Yeah. And
all this stuff that I've done in my life. I've hunted uninhabited islands off the coast of Alaska for brown bear, and to slip and fall and break your back. You should never pass up an opportunity to go do a hunt if that's what you want to do, because you don't know.
Exactly. I just had a wrist injury that lasted way longer than it should have. On something stupid. So that I know the feeling on a much smaller scale.
I'm really enjoying this podcast, because these are things people don't ask me. I don't get a chance to tell people. So I really appreciate your podcast.
Oh, well, man, I'm listening to you. At first, I'm going in my head like, you need to write a book. Probably.
Well, I have one book, but it's I wrote anonymously for Archery Action in Australia, and I started this when I was in Africa.
Yeah.
for 12 years as the old derelict bow hunter. So the book that's out there is a collection of some of those articles.
I'll have to check that out, but I'm thinking in my head this could be
It's
a
on
multi.
Amazon, not
Yeah.
expensive by today's standards. It's
Yeah.
$20, I think.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I'm thinking,
And
man.
all that money, all the profits, by the way, go to the Fisher House Foundation, which, if people don't know, they support the families of our wounded war vets,
Oh,
so
very
that
nice.
the family can be with them uh, during their recovery period. Free
Very nice.
housing for free everything wherever that wounded soldier happens to be, whatever hospital he's in.
Nice.
A wonderful organization.
So the foundation is born when you move back to the States, and
Yeah.
you're working with a bunch of people. So for anybody that
Well,
doesn't know,
not a bunch. There's only a handful of us.
okay, yeah, I'm sorry. But you have a director and you have a staff on the foundation board.
We have the board of directors. That's
Okay.
5 people.
Okay, five
We do
people.
everything. Now we have some advisors for specific things, and so the 5 of us have to do everything, and that's one of the really big drawbacks is time. Uh, and we're hoping, it's time and finances. We don't take any funding from the archery industry because that we don't want any appearance even of influence on the study. All the equipment we test, we buy at
Yeah.
retail prices. A lot of it bought anonymously, so the manufacturer doesn't even know we're going to be testing it. We want it to be exactly what a bow hunter is going to get if he goes to his local archery store or orders it from Three Rivers or somebody online. Uh, so there's a lot of expense involved in what we're doing, and we're totally dependent on either direct donations from members of the board, which has been the bulk of it, uh, or donations from individual archers. Um, and we're starting to get more of those, and it's helping a lot. I really appreciate the people that are donating to the foundation.
And
Uh,
for anybody listening that's not familiar with the Ashby Foundation, you guys are continually doing research on performance and products and lethality of arrows and broadheads with an unbiased approach.
yeah, it's something we really do appreciate. One thing people can do that is free, they can go to our website, and we try to put out a monthly little newsletter type publication. Very short, it's only a few pages long, 2 or 3, and it's free, comes in your email, and anybody that wants to can go there, sign up for it. And when we put one out, like we missed September because we didn't have time. Literally, no one of
Yeah.
us had time to put the thing together. And one of the expenses we do have is we have someone that manages the website and puts the newsletter together and so forth. And he charges like $60 an hour for his work. Um, so, that's one outgoing expense we have. The big expense, though, is the testing. Rob has been doing all the testing. Uh, he pays for the hunts and trophy fees of the animals. So he has been a big investor in the foundation. I contribute what I can every year, buying a lot of equipment for the foundation. Plus, I make monthly donations into. We have 2 funds. We have the general operating fund, and then we have a fund. This long-term goal to establish a youth bow hunting education center where we can not only teach young hunters, but have a place for them to actually go out and hunt, teach them stalking skills, tracking skills, various hunting skills. Uh, that's a long-term goal we have. So I make a monthly contribution into both of those funds,
Wow.
equal amount.
Plus your time.
Well, yeah, I do what I can time-wise, but I've got a near total paralysis of my right hand, and I've lost some function of my left hand because of the nerve damage uh, that occurred from my back injury, and the long delay in being able to get surgery.
Yeah.
Going back to socialized medicine down there uh, caused some real long term problems for me because I couldn't get the surgery immediately. Uh, but I can't do near what I would like to be able to do for the foundation. So doing podcasts and stuff like this is one of the things I can do. Even when we do videos like with Troy, and we have all the comments, I try to answer questions, but it's really difficult. And I actually sent an email to Troy this morning suggesting that, okay, I'm having so much trouble trying to do this. Uh, Let me just keep track, start a list of questions people have, and let's start doing some short Q&A videos.
Oh, those are always great.
You know,
Yeah, I love that approach.
and I think that's the only way I'm going to be able to answer a lot of these questions. It it just takes me so much effort to try to type them because I'm pretty much a one finger typist, and that one finger's on my non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work terribly well.
Well, you figure for every email you get with a question, there's 100 other people out there that have that same question that don't
Yeah,
that don't email you, and you can watch the videos like what Troy putting out. But the
yeah.
one thing I like when I talked to Troy before when we podcasted, and I told him even if you're not like a data driven guy, not everybody out there is going to dig into the data you guys are putting out because it is very detailed and very scientific. Even if you look at your chart on the arrow weight and you cross reference that to the animals you have listed
Yes.
and the ability and the performance of those arrow weights and broadheads on that specific animal, whatever you may be hunting, even if you do that, that is worth its weight in gold. And
That's it. And we are discussing now trying to even improve that get started section, which is what has that chart you're talking about. Uh, Trying to get maybe establish okay, you want to improve things, here's step by step.
yeah,
But again, everything comes down to us getting the time to do it.
yeah,
Um, Poor Rob, we're trying our best to take a load off of him. We're hoping that in the next few months we can start to outsource the bookkeeping and tax preparation stuff. He has to do all of that. That's a huge task. To keep track of everybody's donations and then send them uh, at the end of the year for their tax purposes, their little statement so they can tax deduct it because everything you donate is tax deductible. We're a 501c3.
and
Uh,
you're talking about Rob Nielsen, who's the
yeah,
president.
but the job Rob does, I can't heap enough praise on Rob for his commitment to the foundation.
Yeah,
It has been unbelievable. We could not have picked a better person to be president. And actually, in the little write up we have on him, I told him, they put the quote in there. I told him he is truly the right sort. Now, that's an African term, and that's about the highest praise you can get in Africa is that
really.
you're the right sort. That means you're an ace number one person.
Oh, very nice. And it is where is Rob from?
He's in Houston.
Houston. Okay.
Yeah, and he's higher up in what's called the downstream oil and gas business. As I understand it, now I won't swear this is correct. My understanding is that he works at a high level for a company that loans money to the oil companies to be able to buy leases and develop. And we're talking, $500 million
Yeah.
at a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that you can imagine having a job that requires that much time and still doing. He does nothing but that and foundation stuff. When he calls me every day, and on his way home, when he's traveling in the car, and telling me what he's going to be doing that evening, and it's always foundation stuff.
Wow.
If it's not, going on a hunter, if he's not out hunting, he's working on foundation stuff. His commitment is unbelievable.
Yeah, that's incredible. I wanted to ask you the adult arrow.
Yes.
The adult arrow is like a hot term now.
Yes, we've started using that. Troy is making, but we modify ours. We tend to talk about a penetration maximized, which means employing as much of the 12 factors as possible. Adult error. So
and
we put a qualifier on the adult error
yes. And is
because
it
he said, Troy has a great outlook. It's hard to get people to go from shooting a 350 or 400 grain error all the way up to a 650.
yeah. And
And our
that's
whole premise is anything you do that improves the terminal performance potential of your error is a benefit.
yeah.
We're happy if you're making improvement. That's all we're trying to do is give people the information. They don't have to use it. They can use bits and pieces of it. Those 12 factors are their toolbox. They can look at it, determine those factors are in order of performance, in order of, like, the first two are fixed. Structural integrity, perfect air flight. Those never change.
Yeah.
But the other factors are basically in order of importance. And they can switch, though. Way at the bottom is the one everybody gets hung up on, is the 650 grain heavy bone threshold. It is only important on shots that hit heavy bone. But when you hit a heavy bone, that factor will jump to number 3, right behind that structural integrity and perfect air of flight. It then becomes the most important factor. More important than FOC, because FOC doesn't influence heavy bone threshold. We've tested that extensively. So these factors below 1 and 2 can change. But everybody that's bow hunting should have perfect structural integrity. After the shot, there should be no damage to their arrow, not a bent blade, a bent tip, any broken parts. It should still be sharp.
Yeah.
And you need to accomplish that, job number 1. And nobody should be hunting without an arrow that doesn't have perfect flight, because that's the enabler. It enables all those other factors to work, but it will also take whatever available force you have in the area you're currently using. If you don't change anything except make it fly perfectly, to increase its performance. So you should have those if you bow hunt. And I mean absolute perfect flight. I'm not talking about, well, that's good enough flight. I'm talking about something that shoots bare shafts, bullet holes through paper at any range you want to shoot at, other than a foot out of the bow. Yeah, a perfectly tuned setup will give you a bullet hole as close as 1 yard to your bow.
Yeah, and you guys cover all this in your studies, in which I should say that are available for people who want to dig into this data,
The
right?
information is all there, it's free, but
Yeah.
it takes days to read it. And if you try to read it and digest it all, it's probably going to take you weeks.
Yes. Yeah, I know the first time I talked to Troy, I started looking into it. This was a couple years ago, and I'm like, man, this is really in depth, like way in depth. And it was eye opening to me because it wasn't like I was oblivious to what I was shooting, but I really, you go to an archery shop, you give them your basic information, your draw length, the poundage of your bow, and they have recommendations, and you're sort of like looking for them for giving you a good setup
Mhm.
recommendation, and then you shoot with that, and that's about where my knowledge ends. But then when I started talking to Troy and I'm looking at the performance of the setup, you know, and then comparing it to that chart that you guys have, I'm really only equipped to shoot whitetails, and I'm at the very, very low end of the
You're a
performance.
plan A error, is what you're saying.
Pardon
You're
me?
planning on everything going right. You're a plan
Yes.
A setup.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'm plan A setup. That's it. And so that was eye opening in and of itself, just to kind of look more in depth at my performance, my arrow performance and broadhead performance, and be like, well, you know, hopefully I don't have to go to plan B, plan C, because it's not going to work.
You're not set up for plan B. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The plan B error will work perfectly on a plan A hit. The reverse is not true.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And that's where
And
this,
when you're talking about the study, one thing, if people read them closely, they will see is that some of the statements from the early studies were based on our knowledge level at that point. And later studies, we found modifications to that earlier statement. So the information we had expanded, and we were able to make a more accurate statement. But we have that group of trolls, everybody does, that will go back to a 2004 or 2005 article and pull something out of it and say, look at this. This doesn't jive with what they're saying. Well, it doesn't jive with what we're seeing now, because between 2004 and 2025, we learned something.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. Matt Ranella always says, well, if you go back far enough, I used to shit my pants too. So,
Oh yeah,
you know
he's
what
a
I
nice
mean?
guy.
Yeah.
I'm not
So,
sure he agrees with everything we got, but he's a nice guy.
yeah, Matt is great. And he's a diehard archery hunter, so I'm sure he'll enjoy listening to this. But uh yeah, so but and I guess for people that aren't familiar, you guys are doing the research into actual animals. You're not just
Yes.
shooting into gel targets. You're
Well,
looking at the real deal.
I have tried virtually every artificial medium available to test in. And I took what I was seeing there and tried to relate it to the information, the outcomes we're seeing on real animals. There is no correlation. I've used gel of different types. I have used gel with bones in them. I've used cardboard, foam, plywood, combinations of said ingredients, all sorts of things. I have yet to find an artificial medium that works the same. And it, it well, it I put it out on I think this last video we've done, which I don't think's been released yet. Uh, But I wrote NASA in February and asked them, with all of their resources, the finest labs in the world, all the engineers that are available, all their test apparatus they have, their computer modeling, and considering the cost, why do we have to still launch rockets? And they went through a lengthy reply, and this video we did, I went through that and then took each part they talked about and tried to relate it to what we're doing with the arrows. But when they get to the bottom, they say their final thing is, that they have to do actual launches because no other testing will tell you what happens in a real world environment.
There you go.
And I agree with them.
Yeah, there you go. And that's the same with the flight of the arrow.
It is. We have found, because there are so many variables, that's exactly what we're looking to overcome. It's all these variables. Well, you can't create all these variables in an artificial medium setup. It's just not possible.
And then even when you have the perfect setup on the shooter's end, like for example, I shot a buck last year, and honestly, it was a good shot, right in the 10 ring, and everything was perfect, but the deer didn't bleed. And so that's a variable that just simply I can't control. Even when I do everything right, even when the arrow does everything right and the broadhead does everything right, it just didn't bleed for whatever reason.
Yeah. And that brings me to one of my biggest gripes today. We have outlets, internet like your YouTube, so forth, that can reach a lot of people. I don't see anybody teaching tracking skills, hunting skills. It's just not there. There are some people that have some things out there about how to stalk. And quite honestly, they don't have the right information.
Yeah.
Now, my book, I had three articles in there on stalking, going everywhere from selecting your footwear to how to walk, all the phases of stalking. Well, like your deer that didn't bleed, nobody teaches tracking skills.
Right.
In Africa, you get an animal that doesn't bleed. That's very common with rifles. How do you find it? You track them down.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're losing our woodsmanship for sure. I think so.
Oh, it's definite. If you look, how many former PHs that had to leave Africa just like I did now teach tracking to the Border Patrol, tracking to Homeland Security, tracking to the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
They have tracking skills.
Yeah.
So they found a niche over here for their employment.
Yeah. Why do you think the industry, speaking of not putting enough information out there for the stuff that hunters, specifically new hunters, need, why do you think that there's a reluctancy, at least from my point of view, it appears to be a reluctancy to adopt, quote unquote, the adult arrow and a fixed blade broadhead?
Just follow the money trail.
Yeah.
Industry has at times actively opposed any kind of law regulating arrow setup because products they make would be outlawed. They have actually become personally involved
Yeah.
in lobbying legislation, and they have immense resources to do it with. We have very limited resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good
it
point.
does hurt. This recent thing in South Australia. The state, I have been informed that South Australia is a state. I called it a province. I didn't know what they called it. Uh, in when is it? 1st of November, I believe it is. Bow hunting will be outlawed, and it's because of, I'll use his name, Chris B's video was what triggered it off.
Yeah.
And that video was actually used by the members of Parliament to get this bill passed. And the bow hunters there, same thing. They're a small population, small percentage of the population, just like we are here. We're just a gnat when it comes to being able to lobby. They have tried to lobby the legislature, Parliament down there, to block that law, to get it changed. And they used a lot of our information. And the comeback from the anti-hunters was, well, that's not even accepted among the bow hunting community in America.
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar, Chris B is an influencer who I believe shot and filmed some hunt there, shooting water buffalo.
Shooting the Asian buffalo. Yeah.
Oh, an Asian buffalo. Okay. Yeah, and that's not the first time it's happened over.
No, it's not. There is another video out there with a Cape buffalo currently. I don't know if it's still up or not. But people post this stuff that the anti-hunters captured. Like Chris B's video was the original. He edited it once and then took it down. But anti-hunters captured that original video. It'll be out there forever now.
Yeah.
And it will be used in other places. It'll rear its ugly head again. It's just a matter of when the opportunity is there, when it'll be fortuitous for them to utilize it, because they have it now.
Yeah,
and people should think before they post this stuff.
Well, and that's been a criticism of ours since this started, is that the industry hasn't stepped up to vocalize and police this crap that hits the internet.
That's it.
Everything from spearing bears in Canada, there's a ban. A video was used by British Columbia to ban grizzly bear hunting. Just guys rolling a bear and laughing and hooting and hollering, and that video made its way to their government and ultimately provided the go ahead to ban grizzly bear hunting in British Columbia. So these things are like, they're becoming something that not a lot of people talk about, but the industry needs to step up and start talking about it.
It does, and I don't expect them to do it. We do have a couple of, I literally mean a couple of archery manufacturers that will, they're willing. Matter of fact, they request our testing of their product. We still buy it to test it.
Yeah.
So they don't have any involvement in it. We will not allow them to donate stuff for us to test. But they will develop prototypes and stuff based on findings that we're getting and do small number runs, machined literally by hand, 3 to sometimes as many as 6 broadheads to be tested.
Yeah.
Trying to improve their product. Most are not interested in improving their product. They want to sell what they make. And that's the extent of it. So I don't expect we're ever going to get big cooperation out of industry, particularly not out of the industry leaders. They're making money off of what they've got. They push what they've got. Been doing it for decades, and I've seen no change. Both bow manufacturers, arrow manufacturers, components of arrow manufacturers, so forth.
Yeah, and that's a shame. And that's the stuff that we're trying to bring to light and hopefully invoke some influence in the right direction.
Yeah, we're doing some testing now, looking at what is the best head-toe tip design,
Yeah.
the size of it, the angle of the slope of the tanto. So we're doing some testing on that we'll complete probably before the end of the year. We have some tests also trying to come up with as close to a bomb-proof error as possible. Now, I did a lot of testing. One of my many focal studies, testing, I've got a cook grate that's made from an armored personnel carrier. And I used it to test direct impact and 45-degree angle impacts on errors to find the weak points. I used it a lot when I was developing the internal footings. There were no collars, no anything back then manufactured.
Yeah.
This is around 2000, give or take a year. And I spent probably 3 years developing that internal footing to get it where I got it quite easily to where the arrow shaft, the arrows totally suffered no damage on direct impacts on an armored plate, except that with field point on there, it turned them into rivets. You had to replace the field point every single shot. But I spent thousands of dollars on components before I came up with something that would not break on angular impact. Well, all of the shafts, everything is new now. And we're going to do some testing with components that are available and one manufacturer that's willing to work with us to try to develop a arrow joining system that will stand up to those 45-degree impacts. That will be readily available for people to order to make a literally bomb-proof arrow or as close to it as is possible.
Well, once
and
it's
we'll be doing that testing with, I think Rob's going to use his 83-pound compound on there. So, we're putting a lot of force behind that arrow.
once that's completed, let us know and we'll get it out to our listeners.
We will release the information once we have it complete. But again, it's a time thing. We have a 2023 study like the 2021-22 that Rob hasn't even had the time to write up. You can look at the 2022 one. It's 100 and some odd pages long with multiple graphs. It takes an incredible amount of time for him to sit down and write that.
Yeah.
And with all the stuff he's doing, he didn't have the time. He hasn't had the time. So we're 2 years behind on putting that up.
Right.
It is just a manpower thing. We just do not have the resources. Well, if it weren't for the 5, which includes me, dedicated people on the board, none of this would be happening.
Yeah.
We're all unpaid volunteers.
Right.
There are no salaries involved with anything we do except the one guy we contract to develop our webpage and do the newsletter.
Before I let you go, Troy suggested that I ask you to tell the story about trading cigarettes to stay alive.
Well, traveling through Africa, some of the countries very hostile. You have rebel forces and you have the government, and they literally are in an undeclared war.
Yeah.
So you'll be going down the road and you'll come to a government checkpoint. And you go 20 miles down the road and here's a rebel checkpoint. But at every checkpoint you roll up to, if you're a white guy, I don't know if it happens with black PHs or not, but if you're a white guy, whether you're hunting or not, you could be a tourist. Their first question is, what did you bring me today? It's not, can I see your passport, see your papers, anything else?
Yeah.
What did you bring me today? Well, it got to the point you're not going to get through there without giving them something. And it got to the point I don't smoke cigarettes. I've never smoked cigarettes in my life. But I would buy a carton of cigarettes and I would hide them. But I would have one pack of cigarettes out on the dash with 6 cigarettes in it. And when they would ask me, I would start looking around the car like I was looking for something to give them. And then I'd get my cigarettes and I'd shake them all out. Here's 6 cigarettes. And I'll say, well, I've only got 6 cigarettes, but I'll give you 3 of them because I need the other 3 till I can get to where I can buy some more. Okay. Perfectly happy. Drive a few miles down the road, stop, get out 3 more cigarettes, put them back in your pack, put it up there. That worked countless times.
Jeez.
I never had anybody say, oh, that's not enough. They just want to get something from you to get through that checkpoint. And they will hold you up for hours to get through that checkpoint if you don't give them something. Give them something and you're right on through.
Damn.
It is amazing. Africa is such a unique place. And I have nothing but praise for the Bush African. They are wonderful people. But I have never run into anything but help, friendship, and generosity from the Bush African. Same thing with the Aborigines living the traditional lifestyle. The Aborigines in Australia living the traditional lifestyle, and a lot of them do it by choice. Go on the walkabouts, they do the whole 9 yards. They're just like what you see in Crocodile Dundee movie.
Yeah.
They're great people, fantastic people. Now, I tried to teach a couple of them bow hunting. The bow is not in the Aboriginal culture. And
Really?
they just couldn't master it. But they are spear hunters and thrown things hunters. They can knock almost anything out of a tree with a stick. And I watched one guy take nothing but a short stick, probably 2 1/4 inches in diameter, and knock flying ducks out of the air.
Really? Wow.
Now, that man, if he could pitch a baseball, he could be a millionaire.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. I think we could probably do a whole nother podcast just on your hunting stories alone, because I'm sure there's a ton that we haven't even touched on.
Yeah, I hardly ever get into a hunting story unless I'm trying to make a point about something, except when people are here and we set out around the fire pit in the evenings, have a sundowner, share good cigars, then the hunting stories come out.
Yeah.
That's the right environment for a hunting story.
Yep. Well, Ed, I appreciate your time. We should wrap it up. And man, this has been a great talk. And for those that are listening, you're doing videos with Troy Fowler, the Ranch Fairy, so you can get those videos on Troy's platform. I think he has a YouTube channel. And then I highly recommend anybody that wants to dive into the data, what you guys are doing, the Ashby Bow Hunting Foundation. Check it out. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I do want to commend you. We have covered things here that nobody ever brings up when they interview me. You did an outstanding job.
Oh, well, thank you. It was easy. You're so interesting. I could listen to you talk for another hour. I mean, yeah.
Well, we'll do that sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I let's do this again.
I can't do much else. Happy to do it.
Yeah, thanks again, and we will definitely do this again.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Ed, thank you.